Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 13th of September, comes to you from London. And mixed picture on the screen today here. I'm starting just by looking at the energy mix. We're seeing quite a lot of big falls in energy markets, and that's, of course, contrary to what you sort of hear on the news with the whole energy story. But the fact is, we are coming off the top. And interestingly, just looking at the reports, we're bearish on gas and power this morning. No big surprises there. We were bearish for the week on gas. So this week ahead, we were bearish yesterday morning in our weekly report. And interestingly, we've just seen the power market starting to turn more bearish now as well. And if you look at the alerts, of course, the alerts are your update through the day. This is where you will see the price targets kicking in, and here short term is on a 60-minute chart. So this is what we'd normally use for a few days ahead on the 60-minute. And when we go to the 1 minute, then we're looking at the shorter term charts. And here, for example, we see 90 bar low on German power. That's alerted every time we get these new alerts. And the way to remember the alerts, you can set these up in your system on Trayport, Bloomberg, Icon, really whatever feeds you're using. We're compatible with over 30 different services. Here in my short-term alerts on the 1 minute charts, these are my alerts for what's happening right now for today, next hour or two. These are the alerts there, and so this is where those alerts will come from. I then get more alerts on my medium term, on my short term charts, and this is where I'm thinking the next few days, a week ahead. And then the medium term is weeks ahead, and the long term is months ahead. So this is where you see the big changes. So when you see those long-term moves, so for example here the Hang Seng has just given a new long-term downside target on the 1% point and figure chart. So that is significant for the longer term. So you can configure these on any list you want. All you have to do is just add in the instruments you want alerting on the very short term, the medium term, or the long term. So it's part of the enterprise package, and it's a very, very powerful feature indeed. And then you're just getting the technical analysis alerts feeding into you. So that's a really key part of it. And so looking at gas and power markets across Europe, we saw really the falls here, even on all the power markets, going to the Eastern European markets, Hungary, Slovakia, all of these markets falling back yesterday on the OTC global holdings data, which we provide as standard with the package. And looking even at UK power, looking at all the different contracts, power and gas, we're seeing here quite big moves back. So we're seeing these targets pulling back. So really interesting that the markets are actually coming back, even though we're talking all about energy price caps and everything. The market's actually doing it all anyway. So let's look at crude oil first of all. Looking more bullish this morning. We're bullish on crude this morning. WTI also bullish, and US Nat gas above the cloud on the 60-minute chart and on the daily. So this is my medium term and short term view. The 60-minute target, I've got a target for 9:34, so that's days away. And this morning I've got a target for 8:63. That's for today. That's the 1 minute, the 60-minute. And that's how you want to be using these charts. Looking at coal, pulling back slightly, but still looking very bullish on all three time frames. Just pulling back here on the cloud. That 300 level on API 2 is quite key. Watch for new targets and alerts there. Emissions back above the 70 level. 65 is now the new real support level that we have to watch for emissions. A massive move from 100 back to 65, and of course once we get back above this cloud, we can start to be a bit more bullish. Notice how the targets given this morning have been met, so that's really quite key. Those targets were met, and now we're seeing the downside move. If you're trading emissions, you really do need to be watching these targets. Now looking at gas prices, we see TTF down 4.5%, and lots of downside targets for today. On the 60-minute chart, which is days ahead, we're starting to see that target coming to fruition, and of course breaking that critical 200 support level, which we've been talking about to clients for ages. And NBP below that 400 level, also very significant. And again, downside targets for today. If you're trading gas, you want to be watching these targets, really quite critical. And note the short-term targets for the week ahead there. That's where we're going. And even now, long-term targets kicking in. So really interesting. German power's turned bearish. We're back on the cow below that 500 level. That was a really clear support level. Back below that. Notice how that target 457 was given, and met. So that's where we've got to. You just cannot ignore the target that was there, and we've got another downside target to watch there on the medium-term chart. And I'm starting to look more and more at the CAL for 24 because, of course, as we're heading towards the end of the year, there's a little bit less volatility here. Note how support on this chart is still just holding, but lots of downside targets to watch there, so that's quite interesting. Looking at the major markets now, the dollar is weak on that short term. This is my weekly, my daily, and my 60-minute chart, my long-term, medium-term, and short-term view. I'm running this data on Refinitiv Icon. You could run it on Bloomberg, on Trayport, whatever you're using. You can run Updata on multiple services, no limit. And here we see here that fact that we are just coming below the cloud, so really significant there on the dollar this week. And we were neutral for the week ahead because we're below the cloud, but the medium and long-term trends are still very bullish. Remembering, of course, we've been saying all year that 2022 is the year of the dollar. That means the euro is looking a little bit stronger against that weaker dollar. It's more about dollar weakness than it is about euro strength. Sterling is actually looking a little bit stronger against that dollar and has bounced at that 115 level against the euro. So that's really significant. We're just starting to see sterling recovering a little bit there. Bitcoin, still game over for Bitcoin whilst we're below these clouds, but we are holding the 22,000 level. The S&P 500 index was up another 1% yesterday, really on that weekly cloud, just finding that weekly cloud support, so they're really significant there, and just watching for a move below the cloud there, and we're just struggling to get through on the daily, and on the 60-minute we're just showing some support. So the market's looking a little bit more perky. Looking at the futures this morning, the S&P futures up 0.5%, the Nasdaq E-mini up nearly 0.5%, and the VIX volatility is in the low 20s. So the market is less fearful at the moment, and we're seeing that that VIX just looking a lot better there. The FTSE future is up slightly this morning, and the DAX in Germany up 0.3%. Not enough to really change the picture here. The weekly cloud, we're bearish. The daily cloud, we're through on that medium term as well. We're short-term bullish. We've got some targets to aim for, but they're counter-trend. So you need to be quick, and you need to recognize that it's going to be short-lived and probably not a very big rise. And don't be surprised if the targets aren't reached on the short-term chart, because the medium-term trend is bearish. And if we don't reach the targets, that's bearish confirmation. Looking at some of the other markets, Japan was up 0.3%. Not much change on the Chinese market. The Sensex actually looking a little bit stronger, up 0.7% in India. Looking really strong, the Indian market, still on that weekly chart. Nowhere near really showing any signs of falling away. And the Aussie market was up 0.2%. My Aussie uranium shares doing very well overnight, I noticed. So that's really quite key there. We've looked at the energy mix, looking at some of the soft commodities. We've got sugar up 0.5%. No real change on wheat. Corn is actually up 1.2%. So that's really bouncing on the cloud. These runs in commodities are not over on the long-term charts by any means. Gold struggling still at this 1722 level. And that's just really struggling to get out of that range. Remember, we've got to watch gold break this range. That's the really key thing there. We've just got to break out of that range. And if we can't break out of it, we've got to break that 2,000 level really for gold to run. Lots of gold bulls out there, but you've just got to be patient. Silver falling away. Here we see it 1976, below 20. We're bearish there on silver. Still bearish below the clouds there. And looking at some of the other things like bond yields. Bond yields actually back 1% this morning, but that 30-year bond yield still has that target to 4.5%. And we're building a new target column here, which will give us a new price target. Notice how these targets were met. You cannot ignore the targets. But the big story today is what's happening in energy markets in Europe, and we're seeing this pullback. Is that the end of the trend up? Too hard to say at this stage, but we're starting to see signs of much lower prices, so that's really quite a relief for a lot of people who are buying energy. Keep an eye on our morning reports. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.